You are getting a 2-for-1 deal today, and the 1 is free, so the 2 is free. 2 technically different factions that have a very similar playstyle of being big, stompy walkers. As they have very few models in their army, they have to have special rules and special weapons to balance their low unit count. Their unit index cards are also sold together in the same set for the start of 10th edition 40k. So we have the differences and similarities of Imperial and Chaos Knights, their army rules and abilities, how they combine to give the knights a substantial presence on the table, suitable for their height, and then we get into their weapons, which is where they really shine. I have some advice for your first games as a knight player in 10th edition, and we will see if the knights really are doomed in the new edition of 40k. The Imperial Knights differ from Chaos as the Loyalists have a focus on supporting each other, which unfortunately makes them less valuable allies to other Imperial forces compared to Chaos getting the more independent Chaos Knights. For those loyal to the Golden Throne, the type of Imperial Knight you have gives an aura of support to other knights, lethal hits from the Knight Paladin, and rerolls to charge and hit rolls conferred by the Knight Gallant. Chaos Knights have their own inbuilt rerolls, like the Knight Despoiler's Seething Hatred ability. The Chaos Knights are one of the armies that focus on causing fear. I prefer just killing the enemy, but if you want to mess with them first, that works. More of a Dark Eldar thing in my mind, but giant walkers coming to kill you, I see how that could be scary. The army rule Harbingers of Dread gives a 12-inch aura of -1 leadership and battle shock to enemies all game, and from turn 3 onwards, you also get to add 1 to wound against enemies below half strength. So you may be better hitting lots of enemy units and then mopping them up later in the game. The important part is that the enemy units that are battle shocked are -1 to hit your knights. So low leadership hordes are not going to be able to take down your knights, pull off a gambit or something. I would say that overall, this is not that strong, as we have seen several ways to ignore or modify battle shock tests, including a strong 1 command point ability. But the detachment for the knights lets you cause battle shock just by being near enemies that have taken 1 or more wounds or unit casualties. They are one of the few factions that will ever want to split fire and chip away at lots of units, instead of eliminating just 1 and then moving on to the next. Choose as many weapons as you can if you want to be the Chaos Knights. We know that we have toughness 10 for the smaller Armigers, toughness 12 for the biggest kind of knight, so it wasn't that much of a stretch last week to guess that toughness 11 would be for the middle-sized knights. But if you assumed that, you would be wrong. It is toughness 12 for these middle-sized knights. Looking a little bit at these data cards and the Chaos Army special rule, I think that having one of these as allies is a good idea. Otherwise, playing just Chaos Knights, you'll want a mix of big knights to do damage and war dogs to spread the fear. The 10-inch move is very quick, allowing you to jump from objective to objective, and 22 wounds is a lot to get through, even against an army packed with melter guns. We can see that there's an invuln save from the Iron Shield, but like currently, this only works against ranged attacks. From the Imperial Knight detachment, they have a 6+ rising to a 5+ Feel No Pain, which is very similar to House Tyranids, and gives you a little bit extra resistance to all those devastating wounds and mortal wounds that could well be coming your way. You make it a 5+ Feel No Pain by completing the deed of the Code Chivalric. There are 2 to choose from, and I would almost always pick Low the Tyrant for those juicy reroll ones to hit wound. But I think the Reclaim the Realm is easier to complete because you have massive walkers that can move quite fast and get into an opponent's deployment zone, with a couple of big hard-to-kill knights that become even harder to kill. Once you boost that Feel No Pain to a 5+, you can take that opponent's objective. The way Feel No Pain works in 10th edition is much the same as 9th edition. For each wound you would lose, including mortal wounds, roll a dice, in this case needing a 5+. For each 5+, you ignore one of those wounds. It is the only way to ignore damage, as there is no -1 damage rules anymore. The Armiger and the War Dogs are no longer a squadron, and you can take a lot of them. 6 of each type are allowed in an army because they are battle line. But unless we're allowed to throw in an Inquisitor as the army leader, we won't see armies of just Armigers like we do currently, because they're a very effective tool right now, and having an army of them is a great tactic because of how points efficient they are and hard to kill. In 10th edition, you will need a leader to have a legal army. The Knight Abominant is a leader, and any of these larger walkers can lead an army of pure knights, but before you panic, just because they are leaders doesn't mean that they have to, or can, join war dogs and armigers like other characters can join units. They also don't get the lone operative rule, so they can be shot at from more than 12 inches away. Sensible considering their size. Remember, just because you're a character on its own doesn't grant you the lone operative rule. Thinking of allies for knights? Taking allies in the form of some Imperial agents is useful. Just having a squad of Navy Breachers or Adeptus Arbiters is perfect for holding your rear objectives and letting your knights get out in the field where they should be killing things with their big guns. The weapons. This is horrifying for a Horde player. Lots of shots from a rapid-fire battle cannon. 2d6 plus 10 against a squad of, say, 20 guardsmen. I have said that blast weapons will be very valuable in this edition, as a lot of armies are going to be fielding large units to benefit from those character buffs, because characters inside a unit, and it isn't like 8th or 9th edition with an aura that can touch the same number of models, but spread over 4 units. So that's a bit scary, but the next big weapon is the thundercoil harpoon. Why is the harpoon strength 24 with anti-vehicle? Even if something has toughness 14, that's still 3+ to wound. What does adding that rule do? Is it to fight Titans? Titan rules are really weak right now, and Titans can kill a squad per turn, and they just won't make their points back. I can't see Titans coming back hard in 10th edition. So why does it need anti-vehicle 4+? Even with -1 to wound on the toughest vehicles, that's still a 4+. Such an odd rule. Oh, right. It also has devastating wounds. So combined, on a 4+ to wound, it counts as a critical wound and causes 12 mortal wounds to a monster or a vehicle, cutting through invulnerable saves. That's pretty powerful. It used to have a reputation for bouncing off invuln saves and demon saves. This is a big improvement. That is basically the new version of this weapon ignores invulnerable saves, but it is specific to one kind of enemy and not always going to happen. So you won't be causing 12 mortal wounds to an infantry squad when wiping out someone's newly painted intercessors, but you can kill the new Screamer Killer in one shot. That is another scary weapon. But unlike, say, the Volcano Cannon, it's one we might actually see in regular games of 40k. I am liking these new universal special rules. The combination of them really changes up the game. You can see how things will go. Assassins could have devastating wounds on their weapons, and precision, and anti-leader. That would let them attack characters despite the bodyguard, and really make them specialize in killing characters while being 4k at everything else. Pair that with rule that lets the Vindicare assassin ignore the lone operative rule, and you have some awesome, easy to understand assassin rules. If you weren't sure that a weapon could be anything other than anti-vehicle, anti-monster, and anti-infantry, here is an anti-fly on the Despoiler Hellstorm autocannons to get rid of not just aircraft, but anything with the fly keyword, like Captain Flappy Bat leading the Tyranids. So are Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights still doomed? Is it still looking like an uphill struggle? Well, that video I did on Knights previously was more to show off the prowess of the Tyranids, Votann, and especially the Space Marines, more than it was a dig at the Imperial Knights. Every army should be able to wound Knights, as there is a lot of +1 to wound abilities, and devastating wounds to cause a mortal wound on a wound roll of a natural 6. So Knights will go down unless you get really unlucky with the matchup and have no weapons of the sort to fight Knights. The Oath of the Moment is still a problem, and all flavours of Space Marine get it. And Space Marine armies are common, as in, you're likely to find an opponent with a Space Marine army. That lets the Space Marine player pick a Knight per turn, and you get full rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound against it. The Tyranids still have the option to give all of their weapons and all of their units lethal hits to get through that tough armour of Knights. And since my last video on the Chaos Knights, which is linked at the end of this video, we have also seen that the Imperial Guard Born Soldiers Detachment rule confers lethal hits on ranged weapons made by units that remain stationary, so lasguns can get through the armour a little bit at a time. The Necrons' basic weapons, the Gauss Flare, has lethal hits, The Eldar get to reroll a hit and a wound roll per unit, so their lancers on falcons and warwalkers are very powerful, as are fire dragons, where you can drop in a fate dice and get a massive amount of damage if the knight fails its invuln save. Good luck then with a 6+ feel no pain. And Votann, one of the few factions that doesn't get lethal hits, can have +1 to wound against the Chaos Knight pretty easily. So their weakest weapon can wound your biggest knight on a 5+, and their best weapons will wound on a 4+. Kind of similar to the last edition. You may want to say, hold on, you upsetting vampire. They can only get those judgment tokens as I kill their units, so it will take time to build up. Well, good point, but their detachment lets them pick one knight to start the game with 2 judgment tokens, so they can get that +1 to hit and +1 to wound on your biggest knight and make it use its deadly demise ability as its only damage output.
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
The objective control is lower than I expected. 5 guardsmen can hold an objective against an Imperial Knight Armiger, the knights designed to hold objectives. These will make the knight struggle, but they're not going to always fail or anything. If the enemy plan is roll a 6 lots of times to win the game, they are the one that's really going to struggle. But there are some tactics that the knights can use. These are created in army composition. I know they are expensive models and you may just have to use what you have already, but here is what I would recommend based on the information we have. For an Imperial Knight army, a Knight Paladin has a lot of shots for killing light and heavy infantry, and a big chainsword for taking out vehicles. Their aura is lethal hits on a 6, so nearby knights can auto wound. To that end, I would take 3 Armigers with the heavy stubbers. I said in my video on the Imperial Guard that they get a lot of shots, and the lethal hits combined with that is very effective. I am also assuming that the points for each gun are equal, and you don't need another anti-tank melter gun when you have the thermal spear already. Okay, Battle-o-tron launch! There it is. Okay, you can assign 1 Armiger to defend your base and counterattack infiltrating and deep striking enemies. Have 1 go to the midfield objectives, while the Paladin and the 3rd Armiger go for the other. The Paladin can then move on to the enemy base, leaving the Armiger behind to defend that midfield objective. Okay. This comes to 1,000 points roughly in 10th edition based on current points and the percentage increase on other units whose points is already leaked. And it should be suitable for the missions in the main rulebook at the points people will be playing as they start out 10th edition. I recommend picking Low the Tyrant for re-rolling those hits and wounds of 1 unless you are charging forward with a Knight Gallant. Remember to trust in your Armigers and a massive chainsword. If you enjoyed this video, I'm glad. So tell me if you think the knights are going to struggle or not in the comments of this video or that video, now that we have some updated information. Whether you play knights or you hunt them, my darlings and viewers, have a great day of 40k.